Well, happy Pride Month, everybody. Yes, it is officially June, so it is finally time for all of the organizations to change their logos to rainbow colors and act like they care about the queer community for 1 month. No, but all jokes aside, I have it's a gentle reminder it's okay to say gay or be gay or to not be gay, but it's not okay to be a homophobic asshole t-shirt on. One of my favorite t-shirts that I own. I love wearing shirts like this that capture people's attention relatively quickly. But as a member of the queer community, which I've talked about multiple times on the channel, which if you have not watched my content before, surprise, I'm not straight. I identify as pansexual and I struggled with my identity for a very long time growing up in a conservative Christian household where the thought of someone being gay would have been completely and totally frowned upon, and I probably would have been treated pretty horribly in my youth if that would have been the case. And because of that, embracing my queer identity and really studying about queer culture and understanding queer life in general is something that's very important to me, and it's something that really matters very deeply to me. And queer cinema is such an important part of that. And what I like to do in June, and I did it last year. If you go back an entire year on my channel, you can find a video that I covered a lot of movies on that video. And you might say today, Nate, there's movies you didn't talk about in this video. Well, I probably talked about them beforehand, or if I didn't and you go back and watch that video, you can come back and comment on this and give me a lot of shit about it. That's totally fine. I'm always looking to grow my catalog of queer films and watch more queer cinema, and I think it's so important in these months to support the queer community, and even if you're not a queer person, to just be a voice of support and tell queer people that you care about them and voice your support, because it's really difficult for a lot of queer people, especially in conservative areas, that can't come out or that can't embrace their identities. And it's really saddening that so many people can't live their truth and really love who they are and embrace who they are. And if you've never watched my channel before, I just want to let you know that if you are a queer person or you're struggling with your identity, or you haven't had the ability to embrace that or talk to someone about it, that your life is important and your life matters, and you should be able to live your truth, and you should be able to embrace your identity and express it to others. And it's a difficult thing for so many people, and it's also a beautiful thing when you can finally embrace those things and share in the queer community. And today I just wanted to talk about some recent queer films and some older queer films that, if you have not watched, are 100% worth your time. There's a lot of recent queer cinema that has impacted me in a very deep way that I love to share with you. And so this video could go on for a while, and that's totally fine. And I'm hoping that you'll get some recommendations on here of films that you haven't watched yet, and maybe check out something that you'll really appreciate. So without keeping it too much longer, here are some queer films that I really would recommend you go check out. So for starters, I want to talk about the film Joyland. I reviewed this on my Criterion Corner segment very recently. This is a Pakistani film about a man who lives at home with his extended family, his brother, his sister-in-law, and his very controlling father, who thinks that he's not being the traditional man in the family and tells him to go get a job because his wife is doing all of the work. And he ends up going to work at an erotic dance club with a dancer who is a transgender woman. And the entirety of the film is kind of examining the lives of this transgender woman and of our lead character's wife. And it is an incredibly beautiful cultural examination of people who live in this region, and it covers a wide array of topics. A lot of the film is just how women are treated in this culture and how women are perceived, but one of the lead characters in the film is a transgender woman, and so much of the film is about the trans experience in this part of the world. And it's heartbreaking and it's difficult in moments, but what's so powerful about this film is this woman is such an incredibly strong-willed, powerful person who doesn't take shit from anyone. And to go through something like transitioning and dealing with that in a part of the world that I'm sure is not accepting of it whatsoever, and we see a lot of slurs shouted at her. A lot of people just call her him over and over again and don't even acknowledge the fact that she's a trans person. It's deeply impactful, and it's emotionally beautiful. And I really think that it is brave of this director to make this film, because originally Pakistan wanted to ban this movie and not let it be shown. And I think to love a place that you come from while also being willing to critique it is so important. And this movie just moved me so much emotionally. It's one of the best movies I've seen in years, and I'd highly recommend watching it if you haven't seen it. Up next, I'm going to talk about my favorite film of this year, and it's Jane Schoenbrun's I Saw the TV Glow. I'm not sure a movie this year will be better than this for me, but this is a movie that is all about the transgender experience and the difficulties of being a trans person and coming to terms with your identity, feeling like that you cannot embrace your identity, and when you're struggling with your identity, pouring yourself into something entirely different to have an identity and to share in that identity with others. And this movie impacted me very deeply, not because I'm a member of the trans community, because I'm not, so I don't know what that experience is like, but as someone who spent so much of my youth dealing with immense amounts of depression and anxiety, and really felt alone through most of my life, I poured myself into television, film, and music, and it was my whole identity. And I wanted to share in that with other people, and struggled very difficultly to find people who shared in the things that I enjoyed. And so those things were my form of escape, and they were my comfort zone. And I think Jane does a brilliant job in this movie showcasing what it's like to struggle with those identity issues. And I think whether or not you're trans doesn't really matter in this instance, because I think even if you're just someone who has struggled with identity as a whole, whether that's you're a queer person or you're just someone who doesn't necessarily know where you are at a certain point in your life, I think our lead character's uncertainty in this movie and showcasing the struggles in their family and the issues that they have with their family members and all of the little nuances that exist in this film really open up a multitude of questions that I think anyone can relate to. It's beautifully shot. It has one of my favorite soundtracks in a very long time attached to it. It's a movie that deeply impacted me. I cried about 10 times in the theater. I sobbed almost all the way to my car. I couldn't stop thinking about it for weeks after the movie was done. I still haven't stopped thinking about the movie since I watched it the first time, and it's arguably one of my favorite films in A24's entire catalog. And I can't wait to see what Jane makes next. They are a remarkable filmmaker. This is the movie I would recommend to everyone see at least once. Up next is an indie film I talked about recently called Something You Said Last Night, and this is about a young trans woman who goes on vacation with her family, and they go on vacation to this beach house, and it's all about the relationship between these family members. She's an author who wants to get a job in that field. She's recently been fired from her job, and she just can't seem to get anything going, but her sister, on the inverse, is in college. I think she's going to be a lawyer, and her parents are like really supportive of her, and it's a lot of the conflict between the family. What I loved so much about this movie in particular is it was a film about the trans experience that wasn't necessarily rooted in trauma. So much of it was just this person living their day-to-day life and having these experiences with her family. And there were a lot of moments of joy in this, and there were a lot of moments of empowerment as a trans lead character where she made these decisions for herself and stood up for herself in moments that were just so incredibly powerful. And the movie is very slice of life. There's no real like over the top dramatic moments that feel like ridiculously over the top. It's all very natural. And I said it in my review for this movie, but I really would love to see more slice of life movies about the queer community, because movies rooted in trauma, they need to exist. People need to see the trauma that people experience solely to exist on this planet. But I also think there's room for movies that just kind of showcase the day-to-day life, because trans and queer people, they're just people and they're trying to live their existence. And I think that movies like that are so incredibly important. I thought this was beautiful. It was simplistic. It was really well shot, and it's totally worth your time. Another movie I loved I watched this year was a film called Blue Jean, and this was about a woman who is a PE teacher at a school in England in, I believe, the 90s. I could be wrong on the time period, but she is a lesbian, and she spends a bunch of time with her girlfriend at gay bars outside of the school, and she keeps her personal life very private, and there's legislation going into effect that can drastically impact the lives of the queer community. And a young girl starts coming to school there. She's very shy, and Jean tries to be very close with her. And one day, that young girl shows up at the queer bar that she goes to, and the entire film is after that girl goes there, her realizing that her teacher is queer, and Jean trying to make sure that she doesn't lose her job and that things don't go wrong for her in her life, because she's afraid that if she's true and honest with herself, not only could she be fired from her job, but that there's possibilities that her family will tell her they don't want to be involved in her life. And I think this movie speaks volumes to the queer experience, and how, especially in a time period where being queer and existing as a queer person would be so incredibly difficult, that this movie shines a light on a person who is trying to protect themselves, but in turn ends up making some really poor decisions that impact other people's lives in a very negative way. And how you understand that there's this self-preservation element, and how existing as a queer person in this moment of time would have been incredibly difficult. The performances in this are spectacular, really nice cinematography. It's a very simple watch, but it's a watch that has a very heavy emotional tone. And I think if you check this one out, you're really going to enjoy it. Up next is the film Problemista from Julio Torres, who also stars in the film. This is another one of my favorite films of the year. This movie is hysterical. Tilda Swinton is phenomenal in it, as per usual. The movie's about a young guy from El Salvador who wants to be a toy designer, but because Hasbro on their website will not allow him to fill out an application, because he's from El Salvador, he comes to the United States on a work visa, and it's all about the struggles he has to get a job at Hasbro, the jobs that he takes in between, and he finally meets Tilda Swinton's character, who says that she'll sign off on his work visa if he works as kind of like her assistant, but she's ridiculous and over the top and demanding in the most hilarious way possible. This is one of the most visually creative movies. Like, some of the visual symbolism in this is just incredible. There's all these really unique set of circumstances. I laughed almost the entire runtime of this movie, but there's also some deeply beautiful emotional moments, and the entire film doesn't necessarily centralize around the lead character being queer, but it becomes an element of the movie. And I really liked how naturally Julio Torres incorporated that into the movie. And this is just one of the most wildly creative, funny movies of the entire year, and I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I really can't wait to watch it again. Up next is the film All of Us Strangers, a movie that made me cry multiple times. This stars Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott. Andrew Scott is a screenwriter living in a new apartment building, and he ends up meeting Harry, played by Paul Mescal, who lives in the apartment building with him. The two of them kind of hit it off and start spending time together. Well, at the same time, Adam, Andrew Scott's character, continues to go into this town and visiting his parents, as we find out very early on in the film. His parents are actually dead, and he's going and seeing his parents and talking to them somehow. They died in a tragic car accident when he was very young, and he's able to have these conversations about where his life is at currently, and he is an openly gay man, and that becomes a very large part of the conversation. And the entire film is kind of looking at queer identity and how this person's parents have been dead most of his life since he was a child, and he has embraced his identity and he's living his truth. But what would happen if you had the opportunity to have your parents back and tell them who you actually were as a person? And there are so many beautiful moments of dialogue in this film that are incredibly moving emotionally. The performances are exceptional. The cinematography is incredible. It's just such like a visually spectacular movie that I haven't stopped thinking about since I watched it. And if you check it out, I don't think you'll be able to get it out of your head either. One more for today, and the film I want to talk about last is the film Bottoms from director Emma Seligman that was released last year. I absolutely loved this movie. It stars Io Debris and Rachel Sennott, who I really enjoy both of those actresses a lot. It's about the two of them are queer, going to this high school, and they decide, in order to date some of the girls in their school, they decide to start a female fight club, and it is hysterical. The dialogue in it is really witty and clever. The way that queerness plays a part into the movie is really natural and easy to invest yourself in. The chemistry chemistry between all the actors is really great. The third act sequence is just one of the most ridiculous, over the top, silly things that I've seen in a movie in quite some time. And it has a fantastic soundtrack. And I definitely think if you're looking for a light, fun watch that also has some really nice emotional moments, you should really check out Bottoms. So obviously there are a ton more queer films that I would love to talk about this month. So let me know in the comments right now if you would like to see a part 2. I would really like to make one. And if you would like to watch a part 2, I will 100% make one. Let me know in the comments what some of your favorite queer cinema is. I would love to hear it. There are a ton of movies I want to add. These are obviously a lot of recent films that I've watched, but there are also a lot of movies I mentioned in last year's as well that I really appreciate a lot. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day, and happy Pride Month, everybody.